Senate Chamber programme sound. This is the Northern Ireland.
It is on. I've received apologies from Matthew and Gemma has given authority for your vote, Malaysia.
Thank you.
Yep. Declaration of interest. I have one declaration on item 9. You might declare it as well, Malaysia. It's about reference to the soft play area and one of the business of correspondence. Okay. There's no chairperson's business. Draft minutes of the proceedings, draft minutes of the meeting on the 2nd of February at page 6. Members content? Content. These are agreed. There are no matters arising. That is agreed. We move on to oral evidence, Budget Bill, Department of Finance. Can I welcome Joanne, Barry and Roisin?
Hello, good afternoon.
Hello, Barry.
Good afternoon.
Hi, Roisin. Haven't seen you in at least a week. All right. Okay, team, this is the oral briefing on the department officials on the budget bill. We've got Joanne, Barry and Roisin with us. The clerk's brief is page 17. Ministerial correspondence on the budget bill is at page 21. Departmental briefing paper is at page 23. The estimates memoranda is at page 39. The budget bill 2022 and the EFM are at page 95. Spring supplementary estimates for 21-22 are at page 153. The vote and account estimates on page 491. January monthly forecast outturn data is at page 499. And our previous committee correspondence to the Speaker is page 526. Excuse me. Joanne, Barry and Roisin, as usual, you're welcome to the Committee for Finance. We've invited you to the meeting to provide members with an oral briefing on the budget bill, spring supplementary estimates and the vote on account. So, Joanne, are you going to speak?
No, Chair. I'm going to let Barry do the opening remarks and then we'll all hopefully be able to answer your questions.
Okay, Barry, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to brief the committee on the first budget bill of 2022. As the committee will be aware, this budget bill is comprised of two parts: the cash and resource provision for 2021-22, which is based on the spring supplementary estimates, and then the cash and resource provision for the 2022-23 vote on account. The spring supplementary estimate position is set out in the SSE document, which has been provided to the committee, and this budget bill reflects the final position for the current financial year. This is essential to ensure that departments can spend the funding that has been allocated between the main estimates and the end of the financial year. The committee will note the additional information included this year within the SSE document at the committee's request. That's including Table 2, which details the expenditure that is resting on sole authority of this Budget Act, and also Table 3, which lists headroom, which has been included in the estimate for a number of departments to allow for additional allocations post-January monitoring. The vote on account for 2022-23 is essentially a bridging mechanism which allows departmental expenditure to continue following the start of the new financial year in April until such times as the budget number 2 bill, which will accompany the main estimates, receives royal assent, which is usually in July. The vote on account does not reflect a set financial position, but is instead based on a percentage of the amounts voted for 21-22 as part of this bill, and I would stress it is not related to the draft budget itself. The committee has also been provided with copies of estimates memoranda produced by each department. Again, this is something that the committee had requested following discussions on the financial reporting bill, and these have already proved a useful tool in ensuring that the estimates are complete and accurate. This has been a new process for departments, and it is our plan to build on the content and detail included in these, and we would certainly appreciate any feedback that the committee would like to provide on them. The departments will provide these memoranda to their own individual departmental scrutiny committees to assist with the briefing and to aid the committee's scrutiny. I know that one of the key, in fact, the key consideration for this committee is whether to agree accelerated passage for this bill. It is vitally important that this bill receives royal assent before the end of the financial year if there is not to be a significant and adverse impact on the departmental services.
Barry, you can skip that bit. We got that bit.
Okay.
We've heard it a few times before.
Okay. I'll have to, apologies, I'll have to find out where my notes follow on then from that. Okay, although we would stress, as well as the impact on delivery services, would also lead to department underspends, which could ultimately result in funding being returned to Treasury. I appreciate the granting accelerated passage dependent on the committee being satisfied that there's been appropriate consultation with it. This bill and the associated SSEs represent the outworking of all of the in-year monitoring rounds that have taken place through 2021-22 year. And I hope that the committee agrees that there has been ongoing engagement and consultation throughout the year, particularly for the June, October and January monitoring rounds. And with that, I'll close. We're happy to take any questions that or queries that the committee may have.
Okay, and it's a question to all three of you, but I know, Joanne, the question we all have, look, in the absence of the executive, can the budget bill progress? I think, hopefully the answer you're going to give us is yes. But is there any danger that the budget bill won't conclude its passage in good time with any consequent adverse consequences? And again, thanks the department for the correspondence. I think I wrote to the department last week seeking to what were the likely outcomes and some of the pinch points were as well. But thank you for that correspondence. But just for the record, can you just state where we are in the budget?
Yes, Chair. I'm pleased to be able to say that the budget bill can proceed as normal through the Assembly, and it's planned to be introduced on the 21st. Obviously, circumstances are slightly different this year, but we would hope that that wouldn't have any impact on the bill itself. Of course, it is also subject to cross-community support and being voted through.
Okay, and obviously with that as well, I know the Minister said there's not going to be a problem with setting the regional rate, but that's clear that we can set the regional rate, and indeed the the £50 million business rates holiday will go ahead as planned.
That's certainly the intention. That was agreed by the Executive as part of its considerations of the draft budget. They were separate recommendations from the ones which had the draft budget just being agreed for consultation.
Joanne, just to be clear, it was as you had said intention. Is there any doubt?
No, sorry. It's just that the race legislation is not my area as such, but no, there's no doubt. As far as I'm aware, it's proceeding as normal.
Okay. And look, we knew from the last monitoring round there was a substantial underspend and money that had come back into the centre. And we have, in conversations with you and also close monitoring we've been doing over the last month and a bit, we know that there's likely to be further monies coming back into the centre. Now, normally those would be apportioned out after discussions across the Executive. What's going to happen with those monies?
Well, you're absolutely right that there will be, and there are already changes from the January monitoring position. We're currently finalising the end of year position with Treasury, and that will have a significant impact on the resources available. And you may also be aware that Treasury made a few announcements last week, one of which was a council tax rebate in England, which would provide funding for this financial year, but Treasury thankfully have agreed that that funding can be carried forward into the next financial year. In terms of the ability to make further allocations, as you know, the normal process would be that those would go back to the Executive for approval, and we're currently considering what other options are open to us, because obviously we do not want to see funding being returned to Treasury simply because there isn't an Executive to approve it.
Okay. That leads me on to two questions. First of all, have we got an indication yet of what the quantum is likely to be? First question. And the second question is, have we started engaging with the Treasury, who must just roll their eyes every time we try and get in communication with them? But have we got any indication that we would probably like to roll more over, if that would be possible due to the, I keep using the word unique circumstances, but where we are here? You know where I'm getting to, Joanne.
Yeah, I do, and there's ongoing engagement with the Treasury on those matters. So the position will change from the January monitoring position. We're working through that detail at the moment. I think the capital position will probably resolve itself, and we will be left with slightly more unallocated funding on the resource side, but those figures have to be firmed up yet. And then we will look at the options open to us to see if there is any way to make further allocations this year for worthwhile projects. And we'll also be engaging with Treasury, and we are already doing so at the same time.
I'm just thinking if there is, and my biggest concern is if there is a considerable amount similar to the autumn monitoring round that came in, can there be provisions within the departments to retain what they would have given up and carry that forward, or what are we looking at?
Well, firstly, departments, the last opportunity for departments to surrender money formally would have been the January monitoring round, so we wouldn't be expecting departments to surrender any more money. Right. But you're absolutely right, they could actually underspend against their final plan for the year, so that is a risk, and that's one we're monitoring closely with departments. There's no provision for departments themselves to carry funding forward. The executive does have the ability to carry forward funding under the budget exchange scheme, and for Resource Del, that limit is around 104 million. Yeah. So the amount we had unallocated following the January monitoring round was within the amounts that we could actually carry forward without any further flexibility from Treasury. But obviously we have to keep an eye on the overall position, so we need to finalise the position with Treasury as regards Barnett consequentials. We need to keep in touch with the departments on potential underspends to make sure that we don't exceed the amount that we can carry forward. As I did say, we have 100 million which we can certainly carry forward from the announcement last week on the council tax rebate, and that doesn't affect our budget exchange limits. So that is on top of the 104 million that we're able to carry forward under that.
How much? How much is the council tax?
It's 100 million.
So the 100 million is the Barnett consequential from the council tax? The
100 million is the Barnett consequential that we will receive from that, and Treasury have already said that not just for us but for all devolved administrations, that can be carried forward if we wish to do so. So given the amount of funding we have unallocated, we'd be planning to carry that forward. Okay.
And just the final question, because you said the executive has the right to carry forward. The key word there was executive. Is it understood that it is the Department of Finance who will be carrying it forward?
Well, it's the carry forward of the block grant. It doesn't require executive approval, so we just sort of tend to refer to the executive's block grant. But yeah, it's the block grant can carry that amount forward. So the executive as a devolved administration, as opposed to the executive as opposed to the executive committee as such. So yes, we will.
Okay, Militia.
That will be carried forward automatically, so to speak, up to that limit.
Yeah, cheers. Thanks, Joanne. Militia.
Thank you all for this. You're very welcome once again here. Just to get clarity from yourself as well, can allocations still be made without executive approval?
That is something we're exploring at the moment, so we will be taking advice on that.
So then the Welfare Supplementary Payments Bill, which is likely to go through the Assembly in the coming weeks, does that still need to be designated as spending under sole authority?
I'm looking at Barry for that one.
Yes, well, I'll just come in because this has been a moving feast, as you can understand, because actually the legislation's been going through, and obviously we had to print at a particular time on the estimate. So I'd asked the Department for Communities for an update on this. So the position they've given me is on the welfare mitigation legislation is that as the Assembly has recently approved legislation to extend each of those existing mitigation schemes other than for the social sector size criteria, which is what lay people would refer to as the bedroom tax mitigation measure, until the 31st of March 2025, and that legislation is now in operation. Legislation to close other loopholes in the mitigation scheme have also been approved and will come into operation from the 10th of February, which is tomorrow. A bill to extend the SSSC mitigation scheme has now passed its consideration stage, and it is anticipated that that bill would complete final stage and receive royal assent by April. Department for Community intends to make further regulations to extend the existing mitigation schemes to universal credit claimants. These must be approved by the Assembly, and until that time, the payments to these claimants will continue to be made under the sole authority of the Budget Act. So you appreciate that whenever we had to press print with the estimates, we had included that in the knowledge that as that legislation came through, it would hope that a significant proportion of that will not all then actually need to be taken forward under the sole authority, but we wanted to make sure that we were being open and sort of prepared for a worst case scenario there.
Okay. And then just to move on, the vote on account, which will provide 45% of previous year's budget into the next financial year. Can you confirm how much that is?
Yes, I can indeed. So that there's two amounts. One is the cash amount, and one is the resource amount. So the cash amount, you'll find that in schedule Schedule 4 of the bill, and the amount there is £9,822,408,000. That is the cash amount of the vote on account, and then the resource amount of the vote on account is, you find that in clause 6 of the bill, and that is £11,090,573,000.
And do you have an expectation when that particular money would run out?
That 45% is set at a level that should ensure that departments will be able to continue to function until the end of July. Not all departments will use cash at exactly the same rate, so it is quite likely that a number of departments will be able to would be able to continue to operate for some time after the 31st of July. But we would anticipate the first departments would start to run out of money at some stage after the 31st of July. And I hope I'm not anticipating a further question on this, but in the situation that a further budget bill hadn't been passed by the 31st of July, at that stage, the Permanent Secretary for the Department of Finance has the ability to use his powers under Section 59 of the Northern Ireland Act and Section 7 of the Government Resource and Accounts Act from the 31st of July. So the vote on account, we would certainly anticipate, will be sufficient to keep departments functioning until at least that point and probably beyond.
And just my final question on that, if the Secretary of State would say had to step in to complete the budget for us, is it likely that health won't be prioritised then in the budget as the Minister is proposing currently?
If I can step in and take that one, I would say if we were in those circumstances, we couldn't comment at this stage what the Secretary of State would choose to do. So the risk is that without a budget agreed, the draft budget position could change significantly, and that would include the funding that's being provided to health.
Thanks, Minister. Sir. Jim Master.
Yeah, good afternoon. Of course, there's never been a draft budget agreed for the Executive, isn't that right?
That's right. It was agreed for consultation. It was not an agreed position.
Yeah. In terms of the budget bill that we're now bringing forward, was that agreed by the Executive?
No, but it wouldn't be normal for a budget bill to be agreed by the Executive, but the January monitoring position upon which it is based has been agreed by the Executive. The only thing that has moved on since then is the inclusion, and Barry will correct me if I'm wrong, is the inclusion of the headroom. And the Executive did say that it intended to review the position and make further allocations.
But it obviously is a cross-cutting measure.
Yeah.
Yes. And departments would not be, while the headroom... Sorry?
If it's a cross-cutting measure, would you not expect executive approval?
Yeah.
Well, the budget bill, Barry, correct me if I'm wrong, does not receive executive approval because the position on which it's based has executive approval.
That's correct. The Finance Minister, for any budget bill, because it's always written to an agreed executive position, the Finance Minister will inform his executive colleagues, and he did indeed do so. He wrote to the executive to inform him that he was bringing this budget bill through, but it in itself doesn't require executive agreement because the decisions as to the expenditure plans this bill is written to have already been agreed by the executive, and therefore all this is doing is actually putting into place the plans which the executive have already agreed.
You mentioned their headroom. Once again, you're building in very substantial headroom, up to 180 million for some departments. And that is to enable the executive to make further last-minute allocations. But if the executive isn't meeting, there can't be allocations. So should the headroom be in there at all?
Well, we would like the headroom to be there to keep our options open. We're exploring whether there is the possibility for further allocations in the absence of an executive, but you're absolutely right, that would not be normal, and it's something that we need to explore further. But we wouldn't want at this stage to close down the options.
How could there be allocations without executive approval?
Yeah.
Well, as I say, that's something we're taking advice on at the moment, so I can't say whether there could or could not be. That's something we're considering at the moment. Yeah. But we would like the headroom there to keep the options open, because what we don't want to do is return funding to Treasury, which would otherwise be usefully employed here.
Yeah. And I should, Sorry, if you wouldn't mind, sorry, just to add to what Joanne had said, what we could not do at this stage is to bring forward this legislation that completely excluded the possibility that an executive could be reformed to decide allocations. We need to keep all options available, and that by including this headroom, we are not making the decision that these allocations will be made. We are simply creating the headroom to allow a decision to be made if it is possible to do so.
But if it is possible in the absence of an executive, is what you're saying.
Or
if there is an executive, because we can't exclude the possibility that there could be an executive reformed. If
the advice was that allocations couldn't be approved without an executive, the including of these headrooms then is a bit dubious, is it not?
No, because departments are also constrained by their budgetary position. So while the headroom may be there in the estimates, departments would not, and accounting officers would not reach their budgetary position.
Again, we have very extensive sole authority measures. One of them, it says the Hart report actions which are not covered in the Act. What are those likely to be? Surely all that could or should have been covered in the Act.
These. My understanding, again, I can, if you'd like, we can certainly provide more detailed description of each of the elements of this. But my understanding is that the Hart itself, the legislation for it, while it provides for payments, there are some other elements that weren't specifically covered by the legislation, but. As that's an executive office policy area, and I don't have all the individual elements sat in front of me, I can certainly provide that to the committee before the meeting next week, if that is of help.
Yeah. Well, I think I'd like to know what that is about.
Okay.
Now, unless I'm reading this wrong, there's some very eye-watering expenditure here. I just want to go through it to make sure I've got it right. Total resource spend is 24.6 billion, is that right?
54.6.
Sorry, 24.6 billion.
The 24.6 billion is the resource spend in the 21-22 financial year.
Yes. And then there's accruing resources of 3.2 billion, is that right?
That's correct, yes.
And then there's national insurance spend covered separately to the top of page 202 of our pack of 3 billion.
That's correct as well, yes.
So when you add all those together, there's a total spend available of £30.8 billion.
Yes.
Which is why I called it eye-watering.
Yeah, well, that is the total expenditure of all Northern Ireland's government departments and other bodies. Yes, I agree. It's a significant amount of money.
And that's the first time we've crossed 30 billion, I'm sure.
I would need to check on that. Apologies, I don't have that figure just to hand.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Jim?
This has been very helpful, and I think I'm fairly clear. We've been here many times before, of course, because there was a suspension in 2000, there was a suspension in 2003, there was a suspension in 2017. So you have dealt with the situation of not having an executive to deal with expenditure. So you have the powers on the 31st of July 2022 to step in and to make decisions. But surely, given the fact that there's been some clear direction given by the executive already on how that expenditure will be rolled out, would we not expect that would be guidance to your department for spending in the next 9 months of the financial year?
Be careful that we were protecting the ability of any incoming executive to set its own budget. I think the important distinction was that the draft budget wasn't agreed as a set position. It was agreed to go out for consultation. So I think what we need to be careful to do would be make sure that an incoming executive had the ability to make decisions on that budget position. Now, we would like to continue with the budget consultation and take views from stakeholders on that draft budget, because that will help inform the position going forward.
Right, so that was my next question. That consultation just carries on as normal in the absence of an executive, in the normal way?
Yes, that would be our view, because I think the views of stakeholders and the general public are going to be very important in shaping whatever the budget happens to be with an incoming executive, whether that is based on the draft budget positions out there or whether it changes. I think the views, the issues remain the same, and it'll be very important to get the views from stakeholders on that.
But if there's no executive on the 31st of July 2022, you can go ahead and spend for the next 9 months of the financial year.
Well, we can authorise spending up to, at that point, 95% of the previous year. But in doing so, we would need to be careful of the decisions that are made on that spend. So it wouldn't be something we would do lightly, and it wouldn't be the same as setting a budget.
Yes, but I mean, hospitals aren't going to close. You know, schools aren't going to have to turn off the heat or anything like that. I mean, things will go on.
No.
That's normal.
Yeah, I mean, the ability is there to maintain public services, but it does make things difficult for departments to plan on when there isn't an agreed budget. But yes, no, the lights won't go off. That's why Section 59, Section 7 exists, to allow us to maintain public services.
If I could just come in, sorry, Joanne, as well. I would stress, as Joanne said, that the powers in Section 59 of the Northern Ireland Act and Section 7 of the Government Resources and Accounts Act allow the Permanent Secretary to authorise up to 95% of the previous year's expenditure. So while the lights wouldn't go off on the 1st of August, that wouldn't be the same as the full expenditure for a full year. So that resources could potentially start to run out before the end of the following year. And if you call back to 2017, that's why eventually it was necessary for the Secretary of State to step in and pass legislation at Westminster.
Mm-hmm. And that could be done again?
Yes, it could.
Could.
So now, whilst I'm now clear about 22-23, where does the absence of an executive stand as far as a 3-year budget is concerned, the proposed 3-year budget?
Well, the proposed 3-year budget would have to be agreed by an incoming executive. I suppose in theory the Secretary of State could agree a 3-year budget, but I would doubt that would be something he would want to do. He would want to maintain the ability of an incoming executive to set its budget for the future years.
And when would the decision have to be made on that?
Well, the decision for the budget beyond next year does not have to be made until immediately prior to the start of the financial year on 1st of April.
But would that be for 3 years at that stage?
Well, at that stage it would be 2 years. The first year of the spending review period would be covered 22.
Thanks, Jim. That's an interesting question, John. If you don't mind me coming in, obviously with the 3-year budget, is there any provision made in the drawdown process that says that it only comes down on an annual basis, or is it comes down on the can't remember what it was in the finance bill or the money bill that comes through Westminster? Is the finance and money bill come through Westminster? Is that on the 3-year basis or is that on an annual basis?
No, it would be on an annual basis, because the funding the cash that we draw down comes through the Northern Ireland Office estimate, and Treasury's estimate process runs along similar lines than ours do, with main estimates and supplementary estimates. So it would be on an annual basis. What the spending review has done is set us with our budget control totals for the 3 years, but actually access to the cash is on an annual basis.
Okay.
In fact, we actually draw it down far more frequently than that throughout the year.
Okay, thanks. Keith?
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Joanne, Barry and Roisin. Just for clarity, Joanne and Barry, just so I get this in my own head, the voting account for 22-23 is the bridging mechanism, which you said, okay?
Yes. Yes.
Correct me if any time if I'm wrong, which is the 45% of the previous year's 21-22, which I didn't pick up or get clearly in my own head. Is those allocations based on 21-22 allocations spread apart?
Yeah.
So it's a copy?
Yes.
Is it a simple copy and paste to a degree?
Yes, so it's basically for whatever resources and cash are being authorised in the Spring Supplementary Estimates for any particular department. Yeah. You effectively multiply that by 45%, and that becomes the vote on account for that department. So yes, as you say, it is effectively a cut and paste. Yes.
Okay. Right. Fine. A lot of questions, to be fair. A lot of stuff has been covered. Just one simple point or final point, and the chair did cover it briefly. What's the position now with the 50 million on business rates holiday? Where does that sit, and at what point does businesses know that it's definitely secured and happening? What communications happens with business? The 3 month or 1 month holiday.
Sorry, I'm afraid I couldn't tell you what communication has happened, because that would be LPS's responsibility as opposed to ours. But it was agreed by the executive, the freeze on the regional rate and the business rates holiday. So that will be going ahead. But I couldn't comment on what communication has happened.
So ultimately, that's up to LPS to deliver that communication now by whatever means. But there's no issue in any other department, should I say, to stop that happening. That's going to happen.
Not as far as I'm aware. As I say, it's not my issue per se. But not as far as we're aware.
Thank you.
Okay. So just before we finish up, and thanks very much indeed for a very informative briefing session, team. So we've got it right. So your understanding is, because of the budget position that had already been agreed by the ministers within the executive before the executive fell, that forms the baseline for the budget we're going into 22-23. So you have, based on that, you have the departmental allocations based on where that is likely to be, even though there wasn't a final sign-off on the budget. And because we're aware that particularly the Department of Justice had real concerns about the sign-off, and I think the Department of Infrastructure had as well.
No, sorry, Chair. No, we don't have a budget position going into 22-23. What we have is a voting account, which will allow departments to continue spending, but it's based on this year's, the amounts voted in this year's SSEs. We do not have an agreed budget position going into 22-23.
Yeah.
The departments will continue to operate based on the funding authorised through their vote on account, but they don't have a budget position against which to plan at this point in time.
I'm just going back
where you said that even though we hadn't had an executive agreement, we had executive agreement on the allocations. That was referring to the 21-22 year, not to the 22-23 year. Sorry.
No, the reason I'm asking this question, because having sat through far too many hours in Stormont House as we were looking at the sole NDNA process and the pressures that were coming on the budget then. And it was explained to us then that the process of the budget allocations that was going forward, and obviously the question I'm asking this is just in case this place doesn't come back for a while, was based on what had been agreed within the previous sort of budget frameworks. So basically going forward, and hopefully we will get back, but if we don't, it will be on the basis of sort of last year's expenditure and expenditure allocation across the departments.
No, I mean the budget which is agreed going forward, if either by an incoming executive or if the Secretary of State had to step in, does not necessarily have to be based on last year or indeed on the draft budget that's out for allocation. Those are decisions to be taken in the future. What is based on this year's allocations is just simply the voting account to allow departments to keep on spending, but they don't have a budget position, and there's no guarantee that that would be based on either this year's allocations or the draft budget position.
Okay. So it would be safe to say, without putting words into officials' mouths, that we're not in a particularly good position at the moment, and bearing in mind what we want to be doing is getting some stability and ability to spend over the 3 years, we're not in a good position at the moment.
I think the preference would certainly be to have the executive to agree a budget going forward for a 3-year period.
Okay. Thanks very much indeed. Oh, sorry. Philip?
Yep, thank you, Chair. And just on Joanne's point, that obviously would be the preference of all of us and should be what we are all working towards. Most issues have been covered. You've explained where we're at and where we possibly might be going to very well. Just in terms of the headroom that Jim had raised. So, I mean, there's 181 million. Can you explain just what exactly the items that received headroom and the estimates are?
Certainly, you see there, we've actually set those out in a table in the briefing paper that went to yourself. So there's a series of items across 4 departments. So within the Department of Communities, there's the possibility for providing up to 77 million of funding for thermal insulation of housing executive houses. And potentially up to a further 47 million for work on the tower blocks, which may understand is the cladding issue on tower blocks. There's a further 5.5 million for the Department of Finance. And just to explain, this one is slightly different, and this is one that the Executive has actually agreed. If you remember, the Finance Minister has announced that there would be support, extension of the Omicron support package to hotels, certain sports clubs and so on. So while it is headroom, and we've included it as headroom because it is in excess of the amounts that were in the control total tables that were provided in the Minister's written ministerial statement on the January monitoring round. But that has actually been decided by the Executive. And then there's a potential for further funding of up to £9 million for the Driver Vehicle Agency and for up to £21 million for TransLink within the Department for Infrastructure. And then the final item is up to £22 million for the Department of Education for a combination of energy costs within schools and for potential teachers' pay settlement. So as Stress there have said, in each case I've said up to, because it's not to say that all of those allocations would be made or even each of those allocations would be made in full, but it is simply to provide the headroom to allow a decision to be made on those allocations.
Okay, and I mean, you mentioned the 5 million Omicron for hospitality, hotels, etc. I mean, had there been any bids made for the other items that you've identified?
Yes, the Finance Minister had written following the January... sorry, Joanne, go ahead.
Sorry, I think you were going to say exactly what I was going to say. Following the January monitoring round and with the amount of funding left unallocated, Finance Minister asked other ministers to come forward with proposals, and those reflect the proposals that have been brought forward.
Okay, and just for clarity again, so they've brought forward, but we're not sure yet without the Executive if a decision can be made on this spend?
No, that's something that's being considered at the moment. And we also need to have the funding position finalised for the year to know how much funding is available. So there are still decisions to be made there. Okay,
and if the advice comes back that the Executive can't, then that money either it goes back to the Treasury, or if it's under the 104 million can be brought into next year.
Yes, that's absolutely right. At the moment, the amount we have unallocated is below the limit that we can carry forward under the normal mechanisms. But obviously there's the potential for departments to underspend further, which may push us above those limits. So it may be, the better position would be to be able to allocate the funding to make that position safe. If that's not possible, we may have to discuss with Treasury if they can provide additional flexibility.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Philip. Joanne, just a question there Philip raised, question about communities and thermal insulating. Was there a Barnett consequential coming across because of the improvements in England and Wales housing stock? Wasn't there something to do with that? Were we expecting a Barnett consequential coming for that?
Off the top of my head, Chair, I couldn't tell you. If there were announcements in England, we would have received Barnett and that, but I don't have the detail in front of me, so it's quite possible that there was, but it's something we can confirm.
Okay, thanks very much indeed. Pat, do you want to ask a question?
No, I'm fine. I'm sorry I had to go out, and so I was a bit later, Chair, but I did have one, and it may well have been answered.
Go ahead.
Just if you give me a second. Now my glasses are misplaced. But it was to do with the just 1 second.
You're amongst friends, Pat. Crack on.
Okay, thanks. I was going to ask about the I was trying to get, I can't get my head around, Joanne, the welfare reform mitigation required the sole authority. Has that been answered? Or
yeah, sir, Melly asked that.
That's okay. Well, that's all right. I'll see it then. I'll go back in and I'll see that. Thanks very much. That's all I couldn't understand. Thank you,
Okay,
Chair.
thanks. Just finally, Joanne, thanks very much indeed for producing the estimates memorandum. They've come back, and it's good to see that at least 2 departments, including yourselves, have actually produced a fairly useful one. And if you get the opportunity to explain to the other departments, Standfast Communities, what they're supposed to be doing, that would be very, very good. But it's a good start. But thanks for that and all the rest of it.
Yeah, I think, Chair, as Barry said, we're very keen to get your feedback on that, so as we can improve on it going forward. So that would be very helpful for us, and then we will certainly engage with the departments.
Sure.
Yeah,
Before everyone goes,
as I said in the, As I said, in the opening remarks, I hope that the committee will find that actually when we come to the main estimates, that the estimates memorandum will actually be of even more use, because with the alignment of the budgets and estimates, which will come through the review financial process as a result of the financial reporting bill, I would hope that it'll actually be of even greater benefit than it is at the minute.
Okay, Pat?
And there will be a budget. They're confirmed there will be a budget for this year, but our 3-year budget is gone, I presume, or what they were saying, if they come back in, if there was a way that, not the hokey-pokey government again, but if they came back in, is there a possibility that that might lead to a stronger type budget for the 3 years?
Anything, and I think, and again, and we also commend the work of the Department of Finance officials, but also commend the work, the work with the Fiscal Council, because I think we're beginning to see at long last a joined up approach in reporting, so at least we're going to have a better overview of what's happening, and I think that should be particularly useful.
And Chair, I just have to echo those comments. It must be so difficult in these circumstances in order to try and set out where we are and project where we're going forward. And I think that we in the committee do our thanks to those officials that seem to be working with different signals coming their way, but doing the best that they possibly can under the most difficult of circumstances.
Okay, thanks. Thanks very much indeed. Thanks, Roisin. Thanks. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joanne.
Thank you.
Okay, talk to you soon. Cheers.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Okay, Tim, moving on swiftly from the oral evidence on the budget bill. We're moving on to the oral evidence on the 2021 spending and 22-20 draft budget for the Department of Finance. And we've got Stuart and Janice, who will be with us shortly. We'll receive an oral briefing on the 2021 spending and 2022 draft budget. The briefing paper is at page 530. The budget paper is page 536. The Spring Supplementary Estimates Memorandum is page 542. Relevant extract from the Department of Finance Annual Report is page 557. And the Investing Activity Report is on page 560. Welcome. Stuart, how are you doing? So, Janice, welcome. You're both very welcome to the Committee for Finance, and we're inviting you to provide a briefing of the Department's budget plans on the Department's spending for 21-22. Who's leading off? Is it you, Stuart?
Yeah, we'll do the budget first, and then, or do you want the estimates as well?
No, crack on with the budget, and then we can do the estimates afterwards.
Okay. Well, we provided the committee with a briefing, and I'll go through this at a high level rather than reading it out verbatim, if that's okay.
Yeah, happy.
So for the 3-year period, the 22 to 25 period, the department was allocated 168.5, 172.1 million, and 174.1 million over those periods. So that represented a 2% cut of 3 million on the 2021-22 opening baseline, but we did get additional allocations of 3.4, 7 and 9 million in those various years. We've just provided you with a table there below just to give you an idea of how that money is allocated out, but that's obviously a very indicative table. It hasn't been finally decided. To give you some background, the department, 90% of the budget is committed to either salaries or contracts. The main contracts are in and around rent and rates for the estate, large IT projects and projects for LPS. A lot of them, the large IT ones, are in and around the shared services that are provided to other departments. And the department's income is largely from other departments or public bodies which we provide the shared services to. And what makes up a lot of the department's budget is, and looking forward, and some of the pressures, is the revaluation. 2023, that'll cost about 2.6 million per annum. And this is to do with more frequent revaluations, because obviously in the current state in particular has highlighted that there's a lot of changes go on from year to year, and it's deemed to be a fairer system. Doing it more frequently to reflect what the current situation, economic situation is, and the Minister has agreed to move forward on that. They also have then the LPS Nova projects that are going ahead, and that's replacing all the systems with Land Registry and the revaluation system, rate system, and trying to get them all linked and talking to each other to make a much more efficient system for us and for the client, where they put one thing in and it all talks to each other, so it's making that more
and we're not going to boost BT's profits margins again, are we?
Well, hopefully not. So the costs in and around for the next 3 years, and those 3.9, 4.1 and 6 million. And then the Integrate project, which was formerly known as the Central Government Transformation Programme, but that's basically looking at the main finance systems across the whole of the NICS, the Account NI, whether you know that, and the HR Connect system, which is basically the main HR system for the whole of the Northern Ireland Civil Service, and many public bodies as well link into that. So those have been about since 2006 and are really not particularly fit for purpose at the moment, so it's looking...
Talking about IT systems, sorry, just a quick one, Stuart, just what's private cloud?
Private cloud is just the system that, now I'm not an IT person here, that
yeah, but we're paying for it. So
these systems that run on it, so I think it's more like a processing and holding system that it generally works, the IT systems work from.
Is that across the whole of the Northern Ireland Civil Service?
Well, there is a private and public cloud, so the private cloud, yes, would be distinct from that, but you can also, some of the systems are going to work off the public cloud as well. So if you want an explanation that, we can get somebody with more knowledge on the...
No, it's just we just saw that just the name private cloud came up, so I thought, oh, this is interesting. We're funding Mr. Gates as well as funding BT. Yeah.
Okay, so that is another one of the main systems, and then we have digital contact centre, and that's we all know NI Direct, which has obviously been in the news, and it's improving the services and getting better value services for that. That's actually not going to cost us any more, but we're getting a better value service from that. And then, of course, the Land Registries fees order, which I think the committee is well versed on at the moment. Yeah. So at the moment, obviously the last couple of years haven't been ideal into trying to assess what the demand is in and around there. They've brought in the University of Ulster, but they have tried to predict, but I think they thought it's better to wait till next year and see how the coming goes, because I think it was predicted it would go down the last couple of years, but in fact house prices, and as you know, have gone up, and the demand has actually gone up. So it is a hard one to predict, but they're hoping that will be looked at, and with a new fees order for in and around the 1st of April 23.
Okay. Yep.
So those are sort of setting out the main areas and the main costs. Now, with those, there's a pressure across the department, and we're looking at maybe 4.9, 5.3 and 1.6 respectively. Now, those still have to be bottomed out. We're hoping those will actually go down as we look to see efficiencies across the department, particularly the employee relations system, which is basically run by centrally at the moment. They're looking to roll that out to departments, so line managers, and make it more appropriately. They would handle it themselves, which would release staff then to be redeployed elsewhere.
So what's that actually mean? Does it mean that instead of HR doing the function centrally, line managers will be empowered to make normal decisions?
Yes, and it happens in most organisations. So if you have an employee who thinks of poor sick leave, you would manage that situation. You would manage their absences. You would manage what went along with those.
And that's part of the wider civil service reform programme?
Yes, yeah. So, and also then we're hoping then as well not ideally, that there will still be some vacancies. I mean, there's been a large amount of vacancies, and most departments have been releasing money because of the situation at the moment. But Nick's HR are looking to address that, so hopefully the system won't be as bad and the vacancies will be filled quicker. But there are still a large amount of vacancies across all departments at the moment.
It's all right. I think weren't we briefed by the Permanent Secretary that we were at sort of close to normal manning levels?
Chair, that is indeed what the Permanent Secretary said. He said that the NICS had returned to pre-VES employee levels. They've since written, it's actually in correspondence, I think it's probably next week. And they've indicated that is not the case. So it would appear we might conclude the Permanent Secretary might have misspoke, I don't know, but he definitely said
Stuart's right, and the Permanent Secretary was...
Well, I think there's maybe a difference numbers-wise to pre-VES.
Okay, Stuart, okay. So we're not holding you.
No. I'm just.
It was just the way you said it, and I was thinking, I distinctly remember somebody else said something different.
No. I think what he was saying was there's probably we might be getting back to numbers of VES, but if you look across Scotland, England, and various other ones, they've actually accelerated past because of the demands that have been brought on the civil service. So the VES levels actually wouldn't have left us with enough staff to carry out what we need to do. So I think that's probably what the difference between the two is.
Okay.
Moving on actually to I'll just mention the COVID. Obviously our department has been heavily involved in giving out COVID grants. That has slowed down. Obviously we are doing the Omicron at the moment, but let's hope for all our sakes that maybe these won't be necessary going forward, but we keep an eye on that as well as to whether staff and resources will be required if there's any further grants or whatever to be given.
I think this is an important point for the committee, because the one thing we have been impressed about throughout the sort of COVID is the way LPS has managed to repurpose itself from a taker in of funds to actually being delivering sort of well targeted resource when it was needed, and also indeed when other departments that should have been doing it didn't, and LPS stood up for it. But actually it has learnt a lot of lessons, and one of those might be about resources that LPS has. You know, we're not out of COVID by any stretch of the imagination. It could come back, or we need to be able to do that. So is there going to be sufficient resource made available to LPS so it isn't cut back and pared back, so that we still need to have a degree of that capability?
Well, they have managed to do it so far, not, as you quite rightly say, under a lot of pressure. Now, I'm not sure. It's a bit of an unknown, let's say, because COVID is a bit of an unknown at the moment. So to resource up to cover that going forward, I'm not necessarily would be the right thing to do until we find out, well, where's COVID going? So the simple answer is no. It won't be resourced up yet, but it may be going forward. There may be a requirement for that. I don't know.
I just wonder if we should be looking at maybe potentially taking at risk for another period of maybe another 12 months, making sure that sort of when we're seeking efficiencies across the piece, that the efficiencies don't quite come into LPS yet, so that we're not in a position where we're having to reinvent the wheel. Or
well, we're certainly not looking to cut staff. And in LPS, there may be vacancies still happen there, but they're trying to make sure that the ability is still there to carry out the COVID grants, and will remain flexible. As you say, they've been very flexible. DOF has never been a grant-giving organisation, and we, LPS in particular, have stepped up to the mark, as of SPAR and other areas and airports and things. So it's all been new ground, but I know that the committee's recognised the good work that they've done.
Okay, thanks.
Moving on to capital. Capital is probably a harder area to sort of predict, as they tend to be a lot of projects which some slippage and forward planning is required on. But we have got requirement or allocations of 35, 40 and 29.9. Forecasts we have around 39, 45 and 40. Now that leaves us pressures of around 40, 5.5 and 10. But let's say we are still working on those, and we're hoping that the actual pressures will come down, or we may be able to reprofile some of those to meet within that budget. You provide the table there of some sort of indication of where the money is being spent. So as you're aware, the So the draft budget is out for consultation, due by the 7th of March, and I'm sure Jeff and Joanne briefed you on how that was working. So happy to take any questions.
I think I've asked mine as I've gone through. Melissa?
Yeah, just the draft budget 2022-25 for the Department appears looks largely the same as the pre-pandemic position. Now, if LPS is required to deliver further COVID support schemes, will this represent a significant pressure in resource terms for LPS?
Well, it hasn't. They have managed to absorb that within their current staffing at the moment. Now, some of that has been staff who maybe were doing rates, and there has been an element of rates holiday accept going on that. So they'll have to keep it under review as to whether they will require any further resources going forward when they're back up to doing all their full work again. Can they accommodate the grants, if there are to be any further grants given out?
I'll just acknowledge what the Chair has said in relation to LPS and that as well too, how they've taken on that new role in many respects. Can officials explain just what is meant by roll out of the employee relations programme?
Well, that was just what we're talking about. Employee relations basically relates to, if you like, absent management, disciplinary, all the aspects you have to employment of people in efficiency. At the moment, that is done centrally by HR, Human Resources, and Next HR. The idea is that would roll out, so it would be the line manager as such of individuals would take on a lot of that responsibility, which, as I said earlier, happens in a lot of organisations as it is. So if your performance of your staff isn't up to standard, you would take forward that role. Now you would get advice and receive advice from Next HR centrally on how to do that, but the line manager would take on the role.
Right. And just in addition then to the capital programme and spending on the Northern Ireland Civil Service estates, do you have any information in relation to that?
Well, some of it's maintenance and some of it is actually refurbishing buildings. This is one area where certainly we're reviewing at the moment, because obviously the whole situation of the estate has changed with the number of people coming back. We still don't know how many people are actually going to come back in the office. We're sort of estimates of, it could be as low as 40% coming back in on a regular basis. So that needs to be looked at to see, well, do we need to get more buildings? Do we need to divest of buildings? And what's the best way of doing that? Some of the buildings are, frankly, falling down. So whether it's worth actually refurbishing those or divesting of those and getting other buildings. So that's part of the estate and the RPM programme, looking at how we move forward on that. And it's hoped, I think it's generally accepted we won't need as much accommodation going forward, but it's still early days, I think, in that one, because we haven't even got the staff back into the office yet.
Yeah, and just finally, are you planning to buy out any leases or refurbished properties in order to consolidate the estate?
Well, that's part of the review of property management is looking at leases. Because at one stage we looked at, should we just buy all our estate? But I think it's been looked at as having a balance between leased and bought accommodation. Now that again will be looked at as part of it, whether some of the smaller leases can be consolidated into larger ones and more staff moved into those buildings, or make better use of the buildings we have at the moment. Because if we're only 40% of the staff coming at any one stage, we can make far better use of the buildings we have and get more people in, and then drop some of the smaller leases that we may have.
I'm sure still committed to facilitating those who can work from home, that they can work from home?
Yes, very, very much. I think that has been very much part of the whole hybrid system, where if it's worked, and it has worked from people working at home, there's no reason to drag people back into the office. And it's accommodating people, both socially and otherwise. That it seems to be working, and say it should provide savings in the long run from the office estate as well.
Margaret, Chair.
Thank you. Just a quick one. You said it could be as low as 40%. Have you already done some analysis on it?
Yeah, well, I think there's been surveys done, put it that way. And that's why I'd say it's still early in the process, and looking at 40% maybe people coming in 2, maybe 3 days a week. looking at that and sort of based in and around those numbers and the surveys of what people would be doing, and looking at other organisations and things, how they might work. So it's still early days for the analysis, and that's why, you know, some of these projects and things may not actually happen, or may happen differently.
My question's on that, Chair, if you would let me in. Just quickly.
Yeah, okay.
Small. Thanks very much. I appreciate it. Sorry. it's just on that, and just to save time, because there has been a large investment in that, and I've noticed the amount of laptops and things that you bought there. I mean, to me, and I'm sure to the committee, you have found, like the rest of the world, probably a new way of working, new way of communicating better. And if you looked at the productivity of that workforce as it works from home, I've already noticed in your notes, I think there's how many hubs? I think there was,
there's about 4 ready to go, and there's about 11. There will be 11 in
total. So there is a change in this. Yeah. And the change may well come as a lead from yourselves, but business is also going to have to change as they progress that through. And that works its way. How are you finding that productivity, and have you canvassed or asked or surveyed to find out the pros and the cons set against that?
Yeah, I mean, there is work going on that at the moment. In general terms, there has been no notable drop in productivity, and it has had the advantage of making us probably a more robust organisation. You're not worried about a building being closed, people getting stuck in traffic. You know, people are able to just go on from home, log on. I think particularly during COVID, it picked up very quickly. There was an initial expense of having to provide people with laptops and things like that, but in the long run, that's probably a low expense to been able to most. I think quite quickly, about 90% of the workforce was able to work within months of COVID, and now I think that's why that has become the norm almost for people, and has improved working conditions for people, and as I say, made us probably a more robust organisation, be able to be much more flexible.
That's great from that point of view, and Keith will just. The other side of that, Chair, right, is the downturn, if you like, with people not coming into our centres and the other little small shops, and they themselves finding a fall off in that. But there will be a new way of identifying for all of that. Thanks very much.
Okay.
Thanks, Keith.
Keith, over to you.
The man from Lagan Valley, whenever he starts, you just can't stop.
I don't talk often.
But believe it or not, my question's on the same subject. You see those I'm asking, James House and Orchard House, are they owned?
Yes.
Both owned, okay.
They are.
And you see those figures you put against that, 2.8, 2.9 for 2022-23, and then jump down to NI, which is obviously Northern Civil Service Office Estate Asset Management Strategy. Well, I know the bones of that, but what is that? And it's jumping there a figure from 3.4 million in 22-23 till 11.3. So what does that actually mean? Asset management strategy? Well,
the asset management is sort of developing buildings, refurbishing buildings, okay, and things that we brought on. Some of it may actually be selling buildings, in which case, but most of it's refurbishing buildings and bringing on leases and things.
So how far is that 3.4 million and 11.3 down the road of happening? Or is it very much out there?
Well, the one for the 11 million, I think, is very much up on the air, and part of that may be around refurbishing parts of Dundonald House or doing whatever needs to be done to Dundonald House. The decision hasn't been taken on that on Dundonald House. Dundonald House is in a very poor condition, and not quite known.
So back, I suppose, to the Chair's point, and you talked about this 40-45%, you know, working from home, and the Permanent Secretary whenever you hear referred to working at home or hybrid model.
Yeah.
I know there's very much probably budgets, and you know this is what needs to happen. But how can you really steer that if you don't know how many people are going to be working from home?
Well, that's what I said at the beginning. These, particularly in the capital side and particularly in the estate management, work is already underway to review those particular budgets, and they may change quite dramatically, I think, going forward, because although it's a longer term, you know, getting rid of buildings because we are tied into leases. At the moment, you may have to sell buildings. All that takes time, and against the background of not knowing exactly how many people, we have a fair idea of what people's wishes are going forward, but I think it all has to be linked into what is our actual requirement going forward, and those will need to be kept under close review. And I think there is review going on at the moment on the RPM side.
Okay.
Just a quick one. Dundonald House is listed, isn't it?
Yeah.
Why?
I'm sorry, I couldn't.
Was that a rhetorical question?
I mean, what was he on the day he listed it? I just cannot fathom that.
Having worked in it myself, it's not under great condition. But
when do we get, just as a matter of interest, when do we get Stormont House back?
We can find that out for you if you want.
Yes, please. No, that'd be quite interesting, because obviously now, being surplus requirement of the NIO, it reverts back.
We can check that out and come back to you.
Again, sort of another sort of example of the estate that probably could do with rationalisation. Sorry, Jim?
Stephen, you put Jim in.
Future, and the answer was the effect that, well, it was a bit of a non-answer, that they were considering their options and reviewing its capacities, etc., etc. So there's obviously no word at present as to what use would be put to.
Oh, was that a question or an observation, Jim?
Well, that was relaying to you the answer.
All right,
from
sorry.
Or to assembly.
Sorry, you were a bit broken up to begin with. Yeah. Sorry. Have you got a question?
No.
Okay. Okay. Thanks very much indeed. And obviously, do you want to talk about the estimates?
Yes.
And we talk about the estimates memorandum as well. Before you do that, I don't know if you heard the previous evidence session with Joanne.
No, we were outside at the time, sorry.
But we reviewed the memorandum, and we've reviewed all the memorandums that have come back. And if we were giving out grades, you would have got an A grade.
Thank you. I'll put that down to Janice. She did most of the
Well
work.
done, Janice. Department of Communities, we've probably got a B+. The others wouldn't. So for whatever you're doing, can you make sure that best practices spread? And I understand also from Joanne that when we come to the next stage, that everybody will be updating with the memorandum and the rest of it. And I know particularly that the Fiscal Council will find that a very useful tool, as well as sort of the committees. And I'll pass that on to all the sort of committee chairs as well to keep a careful eye on it. But sort of well done.
Yeah, I mean, I
but
think
tell the other departments to, yeah.
I think we fully accept, that estimates are a difficult thing for everyone to understand, even those who are working on it. So it's good that the memorandum has provided some useful part in that.
Okay.
I'm not sure how much, if you have reviewed the memorandum, you want us to go through this in detail. I mean, as you know, the estimates really give us the authority to spend the resource money and provide the cash to be able to spend in the departments. There are some adjustments that happened between those and budget. It is moving along at the moment. So, I mean, Janice, you want to talk us through the main figures that are involved in the...
I think just the one thing that steps out, and I know you don't have the answers, which is why we're probably not giving you a hard time about it, but when it talks to key drivers of spending change in the main estimates, and we're looking at resource AME and contingent liabilities, when you sort of look at McLeod, GMP equalisation and other legal cases, and it all comes as unknown, unknown, unknown.
Yeah.
That is, I don't want to get my inner Donald Rumsfeld going, but that is very much an unknown, unknown. And obviously there's sort of things that we need to keep a very careful eye on as well. That's, the one thing that sort of leapt out at me about the whole thing was going, oh yeah, it makes sense, makes sense. Uh-oh, uh-oh, uh-oh. Yeah, but...
Okay. Well, I'm sure you know the Spring Supplementary Estimates are based on our January monitoring position. This time we've included £5.5 million headroom, and that was for the additional Omicron payments to hotels and certain sports clubs. And that was approved by the Executive 27th of January. So that was
and just for the committee, we have an item of correspondence later on that refers to that. It also includes some of the people who've been in contact with us in the sort of soft play and other areas as well. Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, just so the committee are aware of that. Yeah.
So there is some variances between our monitoring position and the net resource position. So there's obviously the headroom is the first one. There were some rebate refunds. So there was last year where the larger supermarkets and retailers got rate relief, and they agreed to repay that. Most of that was paid last year, but there's a small amount to be repaid this year as well. But it's treated as a consolidated fund extra resource, so it's not included in the estimates. It is returned to the consolidated fund. There's the income from the collection of district rates, which is treated as income in budget, but it's not in the estimates and accounts because the department doesn't actually receive the money in. It's retained in the consolidated fund. There's the SUB resource consumption. So again, that's in our budget, but not in estimates. But their cash grant is in the estimates. Then there's some small adjustments, such as capital grants, which again is in budget and capital, but in resource in estimates. And that basically gets our net resource position. And then from that, we get our cash position. So then we have to take off any non-cash items and add in anything that, like the any additional cash requirements as well.
Okay, thanks. Team, have we any questions? Thank you. We sort of answered all the questions straight out. Well, so. Okay, Stuart and Janice, and thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Team, if we now move on to the next item on the agenda, item number 8, written briefing 22-25 draft budget motion for the plenary debate. On the 15th of December, the committee agreed to write to the other statutory committees and ask them to comment on the impact of the 22-25 budget on their respective departments. It was agreed that the feedback would be included in a short Finance Committee compilation report on the 22-25 draft budget. This would then be published and inform a committee motion for plenary debate. It is suggested, and we've talked to this with the Business Committee, it's suggested that the plenary debate on the draft 22-25 budget is held on or around Monday the 20th of February 22. Suggested wording of the budgetary motion is that this Assembly takes note of the Committee for Finance and Northern Ireland Fiscal Council reports on the 22-25 draft budget and calls on the Minister of Finance to give due regard to their findings. And I think this would be a good opportunity for not only ourselves but also sort of the other committees, committee chairs and other members of the Assembly to have a good discussion about all the implications of where we are fiscally. So therefore, do we have any other comments? Oh, Melissa, go ahead.
Here, just I'd like to, in addition to that, add to that proposal.
Go ahead.
And just that this Assembly takes note of the Committee for Finance Northern Ireland Fiscal Council reports on the 2022-25 draft budget and calls on the Minister of Finance to give due regard to their findings. And that this Assembly also condemns the recent actions of the DUP in collapsing the executive, which jeopardises the passage of the multi-year budget and fails to deliver on the executive commitment to prioritise health, including fully funding elective care, rebuilding cancer care and mental health strategies.
Okay. There has been a proposal. Do I have a seconder for that proposal?
Chair, just to advise members that the motion is amendable. So my understanding is that the member would actually be free to put down his amendment to the business office if you wish to, just telling you. Sorry, so what I'm saying is the motion is amendable. So if the committee agreed motion as I've written it there, you're free to go to the business office and put down what you just said. And if the speaker finds that it's competent, then it'll be put down and you'll have the opportunity to speak to it. So if you chose to do that, you probably actually get more speaking time. But anyway,
we can choose to do it here as this committee.
You certainly can. You certainly can.
Absolutely. You've made a proposal, and I'm putting it as I'm asking for a seconder for.
Okay, so there's no requirement for seconders. It's just if the members made the proposal and the chair finds that it is competent, then it's for the chair to put it down.
Whether I agree to it or not, that's not the point. I think it is competent to be put down. So therefore, those in favour of the suggested amendment put forward by Melissa McHugh.
Chair, just to know, do we need to vote on that? I don't think we need to vote on it.
Certainly do.
Surely, that's up to you, Chair.
No, it's not. No, because it's amending what's been brought forward, so it actually has to go to the committee. So the committee has to decide.
This can be amended at a later stage. There's nothing to stop us amending this at a later stage.
Sorry, what do you mean?
This, as put down now, if we agree the original, there's nothing to stop any of us or any party amending it.
Going to the business office, asking
committee.
If the speaker thinks that it's competent, yes.
Yeah. But within the basis of the committee, that's a member of the committee has proposed a change to it. So therefore, he's done that. So from the committee, and it is, whether you agree to it or not, it is a competent sort of amendment to it. So we have to put it to the vote. whether we agree to that as well. So I'm saying those in favour of Melissa McHugh's proposed amendment, say aye.
No, don't show.
Show of hands.
Show of hands.
Show of hands.
So that's 1,
You
2.
you count as 2.
Melissa counts as 3. So
Okay.
that's 3, 4.
Okay. Those against?
1, 2, 3, 4. And abstentions.
Abstentions.
Abstaining. So that's against. So the amendment therefore falls.
Yep. But it can be, if you can amend it in the bill.
But you're free to do that. No. So what about the motion as it is?
Okay, the motion as is, those in favour, raise their hand.
Or are they agreed?
Oh, sorry, are we agreed on the motion?
Yes, great.
That's a motion?
Yep.
Great. Okay.
Agreed, that's unanimous.
Motion's agreed.
Agreed.
And
There we
just to be noted in the minutes, the motion as agreed now can be amended by any party or any individual.
That is my understanding, yes.
Okay. Therefore,
Chair, just
go ahead.
I make a point on that. There is obviously the opportunity for any party, as Pat, and as you rightly said, to amend this one.
Yes.
Whenever the Assembly was brought down in 2017, there was no option for anybody to do anything. So there is an option for people now to amend this motion.
Yes, Chairperson.
Duly noted. Thank you. Okay, move on to the next item on the agenda. Written briefing, subordinate legislation, hospitality support, and sort of a declaration of interest here. And I think Melissa and I both have, because we've been written to by the soft play area in Antrim. Clerk's briefing notice, page 621, ministerial correspondence, page 622, and departmental response providing clarification on eligible hospitality businesses, page 624. The Department previously made a statutory rule under the Financial Assistance Act Northern Ireland 2009, making provision for payment of one-off grants to the hospitality sector following COVID restrictions and loss of footfall over the Christmas period. The Department now intends to make a further rule which will extend provisions to Northern Ireland Tourist Board certified hotels, licensed bar and restaurant facilities occupied and operated by sports clubs, and soft play businesses with a cafe facility. The proposed rule is to be subject to negative resolution assembly procedure and is to be led in breach of the 21-day rule. Owing to the short timescales and as agreed by the Executive, there will be no SL1. The cost appears around about 5.5 million. Members, any comments? Go ahead, Keith.
Just a question. You see what it says there, Northern Ireland Tourist Board certified hotels. I presume the restaurant facilities and any of that does not need to be certified by the Tourist Board. Is that just the way I'm reading that? Purely the hotels?
Purely hotels.
And I presume there's not many hotels that would not be.
Sorry, Pat, you probably know better.
Maybe not necessarily in hotels, but to bring into that, you know, I know that it's just, I don't know if the rest of us have correspondence about guest houses. You know, not all hotels are certified, but most of them would be and should be, but not all of them. But then we have to look at those that are in the guest house sector that are writing to us, and they do not come under this.
So why would it not cover the hotels that's not certified? I'm not sure the percentage that's not, I don't know.
No.
Okay, so we can write to the department, seek clarity.
Do we want to seek clarity before we say we're content with the policy intention? Or do we want to go ahead with this and also write to the department seeking clarity, bearing in mind the
I wouldn't want
timescales?
to delay this.
No.
No.
That's my opinion.
Okay, are we...
Agreed.
Jim?
Yep.
Happy?
No.
Okay. And you would say guest houses?
Yes.
Northern Ireland Tourist Board certified
Some are
guest house?
certified, some are, some aren't, but they're not listed here for RR. That's I don't know.
So that's a good question.
So
Yes,
ask the question on non-Northern Ireland Tourist Board certified hotels and on guest houses
Yes.
Of either kind, yeah.
of either kind. Okay. Anything else?
What's the guest house B&B?
Yep, guest house B&B.
B&B, yeah.
Right, okay.
Fair enough. If that's agreed, members.
Are we agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Therefore, if the members are content with the policy, is the committee content with the policy intention of proposed rule, and is therefore content for the department to make the rule? Are we agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed. Moving on to correspondence. Members are asked to note the index of 11 received items of correspondence at page 627. Impact of the executive collapse. The committee is asked to note at page 629 a departmental response providing some clarity in respect of the impact of the resignation of the First Minister. it appears that the drafting of the Fiscal Council legislation cannot commence, an investment strategy can't be agreed for the Shared Prosperity Fund, the settling of the PSNI holiday pay disputes may not be agreed, and the Back in Business scheme, where businesses enjoy a rates holiday if they occupy vacant premises, may also be delayed. The Architects Act LCM, which we had last week, can also not progress. However, it does appear that the regional rates for 2022 can be set, and the rates holiday for 22-23 will also go ahead. Are we content to note the correspondence? And I think we'll pass back to the Dalo. That was a swift turnaround, and it was a useful document. Thank you. Next, the Northern Ireland Civil Service Code of Ethics. Members, committee has asked to note page 633 a copy of the revised Northern Ireland Civil Service Code of Ethics, which was published on the 1st of February 2022. Are we content to note this correspondence?
Noted.
Noted. Charitable rates exemption. The committee has asked to note page 645 a departmental response to committee queries regarding the treatment of the reserve forces and cadet associations in Northern Ireland in respect of charitable rates exemptions. The department advises that further information was only lately provided by RIFCA NI in order to assess their application for rates exemption. Are we content to forward this response to the original correspondence and to duly note? Okay. Thank you. Legal Services Oversight Commissioner. Declaration of interest here. I'm meeting with the Law Society tomorrow and the Bar Council. I'm not sure if it's about this, but I just want to make sure there's a declaration of interest so the committee are aware of that. The Legal Services Oversight Commissioner. The committee is asked to note on page 648 a departmental response to committee queries regarding delays in secondary legislation to establish the Legal Services Oversight Commissioner. The department now advises this will happen in autumn 2022. Is the committee content to note the correspondence? Okay, thank you. Duly noted. Deaths abroad. The committee is asked to note on page 653 a copy of the correspondence from the Committee for Justice to the Finance Minister calling for the establishment of a central register for Northern Ireland overseas deaths. Is the committee content to note this correspondence? Noted. Thank you. ASFW match funding shortfall. The committee is asked to note on page 657 a copy of correspondence from the Committee for the Economy to the Finance Minister calling for the use of £8 million of unspent January monitoring money to be used to provide matching funding for European Social Fund projects. Are we content to note the correspondence? Agreed. Pork processing compensation. The committee is asked to note at page 659 a copy of correspondence from the Committee for Agriculture, the Environment and Rural Affairs to the ARE Minister calling for compensation for farmers and processors owing to staff shortages in the pork processing industry. Are we content to note this correspondence?
Noted.
Noted. Period poverty. The committee is asked to note on page 661 a copy of correspondence from the Minister of Finance to the Committee for Education regarding a ministerial direction relating to the period products bill. Do you want to speak? Sorry.
Should there not be a declaration? There should be a declaration. That's what I was going to say.
Okay.
Okay, I meant make a declaration because that's private members' motion that I put forward.
Yeah, but equally, do you want to say anything about it?
I apologise to you. I believe that regardless of the costs of this, it has went through the committee. I'm hoping that there is a lead partner in order to take this on. I mean, it will be guided by the committee themselves. I intend to bring it up at the under any other business in order for us to speak to it. But on the instances where the value for money is not adequately demonstrated, an accountants officer may seek that ministerial direction. But the funding is there. There is a pilot scheme already being run by the departments through education. So I believe that it's already out. That's already out there, and I'm not sure. While I support the policy, expenditure approval could not be given at the time as the business case did not demonstrate. I don't agree with all of that at all. I agree that we did demonstrate it. I mean, that's my own personal view on that. But I was going to ask at the end of this meeting under any business, could I take guidance from this committee, because I'm not sure, just as a private member, where I go from here without at the moment having a lead partner on this.
The interesting point, I think, sort of had a discussion with the clerk earlier, and sort of Peter pointed out, and I hadn't realised this, that even if there's a ministerial direction signed by, let's say, the Education Minister or the Community Minister, it still has to be countersigned by the Minister for Finance?
Or by the whole executive.
Or by the whole executive.
Yeah, so at the end of the committee, taking evidence and closing that off, and that being sent, it was sent to TEO, it was sent before the collapse, and I know that that was sitting in their office before that collapse, but I haven't heard anything back. That all happened last Thursday, and it's now just Wednesday. Went down to see if it's been listed or where it will go. I mean, no one seems to be taking ownership of this at the minute.
Yeah, I think the letter says that DE sought and received a ministerial direction to proceed, and this was endorsed by the executive, obviously, before it collapsed.
Right.
So I think that's go. I would
Yeah.
read that as go.
Yes. So,
but maybe that's something that you might want to, when you're taking your bill through plenary, is ask the minister just to confirm. Is it go? I think it is, but
yes. Well,
she would.
Who's the minister? It's Education.
It's Michelle. Yeah.
It's Michelle
McElveen.
Is that where the
no.
this bill went through?
I'm saying that it's TEO now. Is that not correct?
Well, the executive has given, due to the cross-cutting nature of it. So with
that's what I wanted to confirm.
But they agreed that it would sit with the Department of Education.
No, or with themselves.
I think what the letter tells us is that the executive has approved the expenditure. That's what it seems to be saying to us. So what I'm saying to you is that when you're at the consideration stage or whatever of your bill, you could ask the Minister of Education, who will respond, can she confirm?
Right.
You can ask her at final stage even, can she confirm, is there money for this?
That's the second paragraph from last year, isn't there?
Yeah.
Have you put in a written question to the Minister for Education as well?
Yes.
Okay. Because I thought that had gone through and had been agreed.
Still at the committee.
So it's out of committee. Committee have sent it over.
Yeah, that's
what's waiting for consideration stage.
And yes.
Yeah.
That's what I would
it's down for listing.
Chair, does that last paragraph not conflict the paragraph prior to the last? No.
We haven't seen the initiating correspondence.
Yes, it'd be good to see.
I don't know what they actually were asking. So they've only sent us that bit. I'll ask the DALO for the initiating correspondence.
But as I read that from the Minister, I mean, that is, he's aware of that. It's out there. He hasn't got the expenditure of it, or where that's going to, or who sits with that. But there has been estimates given to him, not to him himself, but through the committee and sent forward.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. Again, I think really probably best if the bill sponsor takes this forward himself. But I think the letter is saying the Department of Education sought approval for the expenditure, ministerial direction, the executive signed off on it, done deal.
Right.
That's how I'm reading that.
Right,
the Minister of Education could confirm.
That's good.
Yeah, but I could read that.
Then there's the next bit.
I could read that's the first pilot project. No.
No, I think the paragraph says that it's to provide free period products in schools as was a novel and repercussive policy and was therefore outside DE's delegated authority. A pilot project would not be repercussive. You don't do it once.
No.
Yeah.
But no, I think the letter is a little confusing. I'm confused. So perhaps I'll seek the initiating correspondence, and perhaps if the bill sponsor wishes to take it forward.
Thank you.
I think I see where you're getting to, but I also see the issue of clarity. It's in the last paragraph. There's no further request for expenditure approval have been received. So the ministerial directive has gone. The ministerial directive has been agreed by the executive. But what the finance minister is saying, yeah, I've seen the ministerial directive, but I haven't actually seen the financial request coming through.
I think they're talking about the pilot. I think maybe what the chairperson is asking is that if you've got ministerial okay for period poverty, what about the pilot scheme? It seems to be what he's asking, but we're just we're guessing based on.
Okay, we don't guess. We need to find out.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
No problem.
Okay.
Right. I thought I knew what we were talking about.
There you go.
No, I don't. But regardless, I mean, the executive has agreed that they're going to fund the period poverty bill.
Right.
So someone somewhere needs to pony up and say, I've taken responsibility for this.
Okay, that's it.
We know the finance is there. We know it's been agreed. Get on with it. Right. Next item is the EU Energy Taxation Directive. Committee has asked to note at page 663 a copy of correspondence from the Chief Secretary of the Treasury for the House of Lords Committee on the Energy Taxation Directive. There is no formal update available. Any comments? Okay. Happy to note. Great. Item number 11, UK and Changing Europe report. Committee has asked to note at page 665 a copy of a report on UK policy post-Brexit. Is the committee content to note this correspondence?
Noted.
Noted. Next item, Census 2021. The committee has asked to note at page 724 notice from NISRA that key statistics from the census will be published in autumn 2022. Are we content to note this correspondence? Noted. Composite information request at page 725. Content that is an accurate and complete record of the committee's information requests? Agreed. Moving on to the next item, the Agenda Forward Work Programme. Draft Forward Work Programme is page 746. Last week, the committee considered correspondence from the Minister in respect of the RHI disciplinary process. The committee agreed to note this pending a further response from the Head of Civil Service on the review that had been commissioned on the adapted NICS part of the disciplinary process. Peter is following up with the Head of the Civil Service in this regard. The committee's forward work programme will be busy with budget matters during most of February, hopefully. It is therefore suggested the committee considers the RHI question again on the 23rd of February 22, at which time the committee may choose to put down a motion for debate relating to the public domain information in respect of the action plan and the disciplinary process. The Business Office has informally advised us that a motion put down at this time will likely be debated before the scheduled end of the mandate. An update report from the Northern Ireland Audit Office on the RHI action plan is not expected before the end of the mandate. I think, as a committee, more than virtually any other committee, we have had a considerable insight into the RHI action plan and the changes that were supposed to be made across the board while we've been here. I think we're probably one of the few places that has managed to draw together some of the dots and some of the disparate pieces of information. And I think it would be appropriate before the Assembly rises, and goodness knows how long it will be before it comes back, that we actually we actually get a chance for MLAs to debate and understand some of the key, I won't say lessons learned, but lessons identified that we have had through this process. And I think that would be a very useful use of our time, and actually might be an appropriate, and I hate to say it, swan song for some of our members, but I think it would be a very useful sort of activity for us to complete on if this was agreed. Agreed? Thank you. We're content with that approach. Yeah, I don't think we'll do another oral evidence sessions from there.
What are you talking about?
I just might add further to the confusion. I don't think we're going to get much clarity. Might ask Sue Greyback. Yeah, okay. No, I don't think so. As there are only a small amount of meetings left and there's no executive, there will be no new major policy or legislation in this mandate. If members wish to suggest any other oral briefings for the last few sessions in March, one of the things, and I know the Executive Committee have had the SIB in today, the SIB have come up quite a few times, and I don't think we've had any real clarity on what they do, terms of reference, and we've noted that not only do they seem to be providing quite a lot of personnel, they're also now involved in training as well as project management and giving advice on project direction. So I think it would be quite useful to have the SIB to come in and and have them to give us an evidence session. I think if we're agreed to that, great.
Okay.
And also I think was it Graham Brownlow of Queen's University wanted to come and talk about tax varying powers to add on to what the work of the Fiscal Commission's done.
We would hope we would hear from the Fiscal Commission as well before the end of the mandate. So.
Yeah, so I think we would be content for that. Great. Thank you. Is the committee content with the forward work programme as amended? Agreed.
Just a point, Chair. You see that LPS, what are you scheduled on the 9th of March? How long is that for? Is that sort of a lengthy session at LPS?
It could be pretty lengthy, actually, because there's several things to talk about. There's Reval 2023, but there's also their rating debt and recovery plans.
Because the whole rating thing is you can broaden it out as a big field. Like
you certainly can, but it was just when we were looking at the bill, as you recall, I think it was the member himself who said there were various things came up.
If you just leave it, Mulla's suggestion is leave it a little bit longer than a tight window of time, that's all, if we have the time.
No, I think
any other business? Philip, you wanted to come in?
Yes, Chair, thank you. I just wanted to raise the issue of the British Treasury restrictions on red diesel that's going to be coming in from the 1st of April. I know I certainly have been contacted in recent times by numerous businesses. I'm sure all of you have as well. So, it's going to put an added strain, burden on businesses. I spoke to one particular business recently, and I was told that it's going to add 6 figures to their costs. So it'll have a burden across construction, manufacturing sectors in particular, and it potentially could mean job losses. But I suppose, like all of these things with added costs, ultimately it's going to end up being borne by the consumer and the general public. So I just think that it's an ill thought out policy. It's not going to do anything with regard to emissions or climate change, and I do think that we should be doing all within our power to get those points of views across to the British Treasury and ask for a stall on this. I know just from I just know the Minister has been engaging with the Treasury. I've seen that reported somewhere. So I think it may be useful if the committee agreed that we maybe write for an update from our own Minister, but also because it's probably a policy area more closely tied to the Department for the Economy, that we actually write to the Minister for that department and ask him for an update on what's happening and what we can do here to make sure this policy doesn't come into being.
Jim, you want to come in?
I think actually Department of Finance is the lead here, because in the correspondence I've sent, it always seems to have ended up on his desk. We have dealt with the boat users, the private pleasure craft. What they're meant to do is to sail around the lake on white diesel, park up, and then heat the boat on red diesel and cook on red diesel. How on earth you do that, beggars belief. Also, Jim Allister raised a very good issue of the charity tractor runs, which will die. This will simply die because nobody is prepared to drain their tank, put in white diesel, go on the tractor run, come back and put in red diesel. That's simply not going to happen. And also, ploughing championships, including the Worlds, which are coming to Ballykelly this year, will have to run on white diesel. And I don't think London, HMRC in London, has actually thought through the implications for here, those changes, because I don't know if they even do charity tractor runs on the mainland. It's completely unworkable, what they're suggesting. Now, the difficulty is these come in on the 1st of April. They've been passed through the budget bill. And it seems to be falling on deaf ears. And I think the Assembly needs to do something quite drastic on this, because it will simply cause havoc amongst the agricultural community. The other one that I've had in South Down, a gentleman who digs ditches on his farm, fine. He's then asked by his neighbour to dig foundations for a new hay shed. He has to change to white diesel before he can do that. That's just totally unworkable.
Isn't there also an issue with fuel reserve tanks at some of the power stations? Aren't they currently have red diesel in them? And they're in a position where they're going to have to burn a significant amount of that to make sure that they don't have it, or else they're going to be significantly penalised as well. I think there's more issues than this. But go ahead, Pat.
You're a contractor. You've won a government contract for a new road or whatever part that is. That's going to increase your costs. And effectively, as Philip has already said, that will be borne by those who pay the bills. So it would probably increase the costing for what's done in Northern Ireland by £25 million was the figure that I've heard raised. From one construction, one quarry owner, that just one that I spoke with. But I know it's not a devolved matter, but as Jim has already stated, I have been approached, but I'm not sure what or how we can do, bar what has been said, to try and write, because it's Richie Sunni's, or whatever you call his baby, and this is to try and tidy up emissions. But I'm not sure that other members have stated that that will or it will work in favour of us.
Okay. I think right to the Minister. Okay. Are we content to write to the Minister with the points that we've
Good
raised?
point. Well done, Philip.
Yeah. Thanks, Philip. Thanks, Jim. Okay. Any other? You've already raised your issue on sort of period poverty, haven't you?
Well, I hope, I know we're still, I hope to have a little private conversation with Peter, if that was possible. Give me a bit of point me in the right direction. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Any other business? Okay. Thank you very much indeed, team. And the next meeting will be in here on the 16th of February. And everybody remember Valentine's Day. Okay. Thank you.
Senate Chamber, programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber, programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber,